Hi everyone, Slapthany Smack Tano here, the internet's busiest music nerd, and it's time for a review of the new Kurt Vile album, Bottle It In. This is the latest album for Matador Records from Kurt Vileman. No, that's not his name, I'm just kidding. He is a singer-songwriter and essentially a veteran of the indie scene at this point, as I can remember back when the late 2000s blogosphere was in full swing and Kurt was turning heads with a variety of MP3s and albums like Constant Hitmaker and Childish Prodigy. He kind of made a name for himself in the trendy ocean of lo-fi musicians with a more psychedelic and folky sound. And Matador Records' early investment in his music paid off heavily when he dropped his breakout record Smoke Ring for My Halo. An album that at the time resonated much more with other indie fans than it did with me. I liked a lot of the trippy and hazy walls of sound that this album offered, but I found a lot of the songwriting underneath this to be utterly average. But over the years, Kurt's songwriting did mature a little bit in terms of structure and lyricism, and kind of reached a peak in 2013 on his album Waking on a Pretty Daze. Still my favorite record of his so far, hands down. A record loaded with these blissful, hazy day tunes, with gently psychedelic instrumentation and lyrics that offer just a little bit more food for thought. Kurt Vile's very weird, drawling singing voice started to gain some real swagger. His influences began to really shine too, whether it be Neil Young or Tom Petty or Willie Nelson or a lick of krautrock. However, Kurt stripped a lot of the psychedelic and layered instrumentation back on his last full-length album, Believe I'm Going Down, to deliver his songs in, I guess, a more raw format. And while there were some great standouts on this album, like Pretty Pimpin' and I'm an Outlaw, for the most part the humdrum lyrics and chord progressions didn't really stand up with this more naked view, especially on the more mellow cuts here. Bottle It In, however, is another change of pace. It sees Kurt bringing more instrumentation back in, but not going so crazy with the effects that it becomes super trippy or surreal. It's at a tasteful midpoint. It sounds more mature like his last record, but still should appeal to fans who have always liked the more ethereal qualities of his albums. It is also his longest record yet at about an hour and 20 minutes. Stylistically, Kurt is still very much in the folk rock, Americana, acoustic ballad wheelhouse, but occasionally you might catch a bit more banjo or some xylophone or even some synthesizers. And I think occasionally on this album, Kurt does step it up a little bit vocally and lyrically. Right from the opening track on this thing, Loading Zones, which is a strong opening for this album and a bittersweet piece of folk rock, with a really strong sense of place as Kurt goes on to describe his dirty little town, the loading zones, being there and getting his shopping done, and then he's having these weird mayoral fantasies. I also like the lush rush of beautiful instrumentation toward the back end of the track, the shouted refrain, "I park for free!" The next track sees Kurt embarking yet again on one of these kind of spacey rock tunes with a driving set of drums. A lot of speed on this song, it's tight, it's driving, there's a lot of angular guitar melodies. Feels like the remnants of Kurt's former band, the War on Drugs, working itself into his music yet again. I also love how rich and jangly the guitars all over this track are. Also, Kurt's voice really pops out of the mix on this cut too. His quirky personality really shines through. These songs, One Trick Ponies and especially Rollin' with the Flow, showcase some of Kurt's best songwriting yet. Rollin' with the Flow is a bona fide old school country tune with a beautiful, tried and true chord progression. Some really high gloss guitar leads, and the strums on the acoustics are gorgeous. They are crunchy. They just, they're springy yet defined. It's lovely. I love the lyrics on this track too, about aging, his friends kind of moving on and living their own lives. Meanwhile, he's just there doing his own thing, rolling with the flow. I keep on rolling with the flow. God, I hate myself. Then there's the track Check Baby, which features this gurgling bass, a really groovy, low down beat. It's like a mix of folk, bar band rock and roll, but industrial too. Kurt's swagger on the song is something to behold, and the lyrics are borderline badass. Amphetamine, amphetamine, you know what I mean, she's got a real kick to her. Some real Velvet Underground shit. Bass-Ackwards is a song on the album where Kurt kind of embarks on this slice of life songwriting. His diatribe reads like a diary. It's like he's kind of giving you a day of his life over some trippy reversed instrumentation. He's on a radio show with a friend, he's doing a bunch of other things too, but all the thoughts kind of string together coherently. I'm slightly reminded of Sun Kil Moon and Mark Kozlek's recent work, but I feel like the difference between what Mark is doing on his tracks and what Kurt is doing here is, I guess, the difference between listening to a book on tape and like a relaxation cassette. Basically folk rock ASMR. Also keep in mind that this track is one of 3 10-minute cuts on the album. And if Kurt's going to be using these 3 tracks to add this much runtime to the album, they've all got to be essential, right? Unfortunately, these longer songs, the other 2 longer songs, are where I think the album falters the most. The title track, Bottle It In, really should have bottled it in. I get that the point of this song is to be as chill as possible, but it's just so comatose. The instrumental becomes so redundant, tedious, and lifeless, I might as well just be listening to some kind of mechanical noise on an endless loop. And it's not exactly like Kurt's vocals on top really steal the show. There's lots of dead air, lots of weird, awkward crooning. It's not exactly like the song progresses all that much across its 10-minute runtime either. Though, as Kurt says on One Trick Ponies, I guess he does like repetition. Lyrically, I do like the sentiment of the song about just kind of being afraid of being hurt by a significant other, and you're afraid to kind of reveal yourself or let your intent or feelings be known. But I feel like this message would go over so much better and hit so much harder had it been packaged into a more succinct song, something as instrumentally gorgeous and flavorful as Rollin' with the Flow. And again, even Bass-Ackwards doesn't go over that bad because the groove is great, Kurt vocally is much more captivating. The equally long ending track, Skinny Mini, suffers from a lot of the same issues, namely mind-numbing repetition, though I do applaud how Kurt approached this track instrumentally. The barely legible minimalist percussion, that really stark singular guitar line, Kurt drawling all over the track with some effects that makes his voice sound like he's kind of calling out over a loudspeaker. Although, I don't even want to get into the lyrics. I want to give me a kiss, girl. I want to wow, would you look at that? I want to damn, she sure is fine. I want to damn, she just blew my mind. And it's not just the lengthier tracks on this album that are kind of weighing this album down. It's a lot of the material in the last leg, like on the song Mutinies and Come Again, both tracks that drum up some really cool walls of sound, but the tunes are just okay, not nearly as catchy or as sweet as many that came in the first half of the record, though I do like some of the banjo licks and Kurt's lyrical musings about planets and bones and modern technology. The song Cold Was the Wind is another decent track on the album, but for the most part it's ruined by all of these really gimmicky sound effects that it's wrapped in, namely some weird scratchy turntable noises that are just really unnecessary. In a lot of respects, I think this record is kind of an improvement on the last record. I mean, the instrumentation and the production is lush and full and fantastic. This album also features some of Kurt's best material to date, but unfortunately the entire album is bogged down by a lot of cuts that really could have been cut. Either cut entirely or just cut down to a more respectable length, as dragging these songs out to 10 minutes doesn't really add to their appeal. This is truly an album that I think would have been better off with less. I'm feeling a decent 2 strong 6 on this thing. Transition, have you given this album a listen? Did you love it? Did you hate it? What would you rate it? You're the best, you're the best. What should I review next? Hit the like if you like, please subscribe and please don't cry. Hit the bell as well. Over here next to my head is another video that you can check out. Hit that up or the link to subscribe to the channel. Anthony Fantano, Kurt Vile, forever.